Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Phenomenon, a Paranormal podcast. I am Christina.
I'm Allie.
And I'm Anthony.
And we are here today to talk about one of our favorite topics, which is cryptids.
Yeah.
First of all, before we start, I just want to thank everyone for tuning in for our past couple videos, and we hope that you keep doing so. Remember to like, subscribe, hit the notification bell, interact with us, if there's stuff that you might want to see or comments on the topic that we're covering, feel free to reach out. We'll have all our info in the little info box. And so we are going to get it rolling now. And I just want to ask everyone, obviously there's cryptids that are very well known. So Anthony, do you have one that comes right off the top of your head?
Well, of course, the biggest one in my life that I've always loved was Mothman.
Oh, yeah.
Mothman, we've talked about it a little bit in our previous episodes. We've alluded to wanting to do an episode on the Mothman.
Yep.
We just launched our Patreon. So if you guys haven't yet and want to become a patron and support the show, we're going to be doing an exclusive bonus episode of the podcast exclusively for Patreon.
Yeah.
So if you want to see that episode, we're going to do a deep dive into all things Mothman. And
There's
it's a lot
so much info.
It's so much info. One of the biggest cryptid cases I've ever seen.
Yeah.
It really got me into the paranormal a lot. So we're going to be doing a bonus episode. So make sure you become a patron to see that.
All right, cool.
But that's mine.
All right, Allie, what about you?
Okay, so mine is Spring-Heeled Jack, and for those who haven't heard of it, he's like a Victorian-era London cryptid, and he's kind of humanoid, but he's supposed to be extremely tall, and he's like a pervert, and
cool.
he's able to crawl and climb walls. He apparently can shoot blue flames out of his mouth.
Mm-hmm.
For what purpose?
To accost women and scare them, I guess.
Yeah.
Okay.
So he's an interesting one.
He's actually in a video game. I'm the gamer of the group, by the way. So if you guys know the Assassin's Creed series, there is Assassin's Creed Syndicate, which was all in Victorian-era London.
Nice.
And one of the missions in the game, you joined this society developed by Charles Dickens, Paranormal Ghost Society. Right. And you had to investigate the case of Spring-Heeled Jack. And you actually had to chase Spring-Heeled Jack across the rooftops of London and find out what he really was, who was behind it all.
Yeah.
And he was a creepy looking dude. He's definitely a pervert. I can tell you that much. So.
What is it about a really tall cryptid or ghost or whatever that's just tall and lanky?
Mm-hmm.
It's like It Follows in that one.
Yeah, that one scene.
It Follows.
That kills me every time.
No.
The creepiest scene in the movie.
Oh, yeah.
Obviously, Slenderman is modeled after that.
We even just watched that movie Smile.
Yeah.
There's a really tall figure in that one, too.
That's
really
true.
So
very creepy indeed. I guess mine, you have to go with the OG Bigfoot.
Oh, of course.
Yeah. Which we will do a whole episode on that as well. Let's just not even go there right now. But
all the big feet.
Yeah, there's a lot of big feet.
Yeah.
Roaming around the world, going by different names. So that's a big one. What about you, Ray? Our producer, Ray, is there one that comes to mind?
I actually have this very obscure one from Scotland. It's called Nuka Levi, and it's pretty old.
Wow.
Yeah, and it's a man who's half melded into a horse. And
wow.
Has no skin. The horse has one giant bulging eyeball, and his arms are super long.
I love
it.
Goes around Scotland breathing on plants and destroying crops as a blight monster.
Oh my God.
My gosh, wow.
I've never heard of this one.
Me either, and I love that we haven't heard of it. Because that just makes me now want to deep dive into this.
And, we all love Scotland, too, so I'm surprised I never heard of that, but that's really cool.
I love it. Ray, look at you, man.
Yeah, I wanted to ask also if SCPs count as cryptids?
STPs.
SCPs.
Oh,
Have you guys heard of
SCPs.
those?
No, what is that?
It's it's like a creepypasta online forum.
Oh, okay.
But it has a bunch of different self-made cryptids.
Okay.
SCP stands for Secure, Contain, Protect, and it's like a secret underground government-run cryptid hunting facility.
Okay, that's pretty cool.
It's really cool. I really recommend that.
Oh my God,
we're gonna have to check that out. I think that would count, honestly.
Yeah.
If you look at any cryptid, it started somewhere. A story happened somewhere. A sighting. I don't think it's any different than creepypasta. It's just a more modern take.
Yeah, like look at the rake. We've talked
Yeah.
about the rake before, which was a creepypasta.
And that kind of goes into the idea of thought forms. You know, we talked about thought forms. If enough people believe in something, even Slenderman, there's videos all over the place, and a lot of them are man-made. But
of course,
there's some video that are a little more compelling, like a tall figure in the woods, you know, following you. And the idea that your thoughts are a group thought is bringing these creatures to life.
Right.
I mean, the videos of the rake are really creepy.
Yeah, I've seen quite a few creepy ones.
And they had never been there before. So it's really interesting. I think those would definitely count.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I'd like to dive into some of those SCPs now to see what those look like.
Yeah, sounds like a bonus episode waiting to happen.
Yeah, for sure. I'm glad that you brought up the one from Scotland, though, Ray, because that's what we're trying to do with this episode is talk about ones that maybe aren't as well known. Maybe some people know of them, and if you do, feel free to tell us any stories you might have about them in the comments.
Yeah.
But I'm going to get it rolling today by one out of the Louisiana woods/swamps/bayous. Okay? This one's called the Rougarou. Have you heard of that one, Ray?
I have not.
Okay, the Rougarou this goes way back to France in like the 1500s, but somehow it transitioned over into Bayou country. And basically what this thing is a shapeshifter, and it's something that is part human, but can shift into a werewolf or wolf or even large dog, almost like a dog man, which we've all heard of the dog man, right? Yeah. So, and in the bayou especially, sometimes they report it being like a big white dog, which is really interesting to me because when we did our first episode for Morset Media on the Henrico werewolf, there were reports of the big white dogs that look like these giant big white wolves of some kind. So that really kind of intrigued me because, you know, we're going to have some video that we're going to insert about some of these cryptids today.
There were stories about the Rougarou as early as the early 1500s, so it's been around a long time. Our version that we hear in Louisiana has its roots in France and French Canada. So it probably came to Canada and then to Louisiana with the displaced people there. Is somebody is going home late at night and they see this animal, it comes up and tries to bite them, and they throw something at it and hit it in the hand or break the hand, and the next day they run into a neighbor whose hand is hurt in the same place where they threw something at the animal. So they realized that it was their neighbor in disguise.
And the one I have on the Rougarou, like someone's talking about how they think that the white dog thing is kind of exclusive to the Bayou version, but maybe not.
Yeah.
If you live in Henrico, Virginia,
they're traveling.
They may travel. So the whole idea behind this particular shapeshifter is that it supposedly hunts two kinds of victims. And this is where, I mean, almost this made me laugh when I first read it. But the first type is naughty children. So it's kind of one of those tales that parents would use to keep their kids in check. Of course. If you're naughty, the Rougarou is going to come and he's going to not just snatch you, but he's going to come and eat you. Okay, which that might keep me up at night as a kid or keep me from throwing things at the teacher. I don't know. Yeah. But the other kind of victim that it would prey on were Catholics that didn't observe Lent.
That's a very
specific.
Very oddly specific, right?
Wow.
I'm like, I guess, let's see, how do I word this? Religion has always been enforced by fear. So especially, in the big churches and the Catholic Church, is a pretty big one. And so, to have something like this as your go-to of, if you're not observing Lent, the Rougarou is going to come and get you. I mean, it could put some fear into someone devout, I would say.
I would say so.
Yeah. So the other thing is the way that you can be turned into a Rougarou. Okay, which I found, pretty interesting. A lot of lore doesn't always talk about that, but apparently if you curse someone who is a Rougarou can curse someone else to become one.
Okay.
I guess. I guess, you really don't want to be pissing anybody off if that's the case. 'Cause
Yeah.
You just don't know who is or is not a Rougarou.
Right.
That might curse you. And the other way is if you're a Catholic and you don't observe Lent for 7 straight years, you will become a Rougarou.
Wow.
7 on the dot.
7.
So if you manage to avoid being eaten for 7 years, then you're just destined to become that thing.
Exactly.
Okay.
So that's it. That's your basic Rougarou lore. Now, there are people who really still very much believe this creature exists. I'm not here to say it doesn't.
Yeah.
I have never seen a Rougarou. But let me tell you that, and we're going to have the picture on the screen. The artist depictions of this thing are bone-chilling.
Yeah.
It looks like the worst thing I can imagine being confronted by if I'm out in the woods.
Nightmares.
Oh, 100%. Yes, it's terrifying. It looks like something a cross between a human, a werewolf, a vampire fangs, and devil ears.
Okay.
Okay.
So yeah, it's not very chill.
I mean, I love this. I actually have heard of it a little bit because, we're a big fan of the show Supernatural.
Right.
One of my favorite episodes was all about a Rougarou.
That's
I mean,
right.
it's Supernatural's version of a Rougarou.
Yeah.
But there was an episode where a guy didn't know that he came from a line of Rougarou people. And in his 30s just started getting this insatiable hunger. And the brothers on the show were there to observe whether he was going to turn or not. So, I mean, the Rougarou has always been a terrifying presence.
I forgot about that.
Yeah.
We talked about this. Yeah.
Yeah.
I love the way Supernatural would do a lot of research into their backstories
Yeah.
on their. Did you ever watch the show, Ray?
I did not, actually.
Oh, Ray. We are really going to have to get you into a binge situation with some Supernatural if you're going to be producing our show. No, but in all seriousness, like they would take the gin,
Yeah.
for instance, and they really did a great episode on that.
Yeah.
The Wendigo.
Oh, yeah.
They even incorporated thought form hauntings
Yep.
into some of their earlier episodes.
That's true. They really did. So I love what they do with it. But there is a way, if you live out in the bayou or, anywhere out there where there could be Rougarou country, that you can keep them away. And I really love this method of keeping it away or from getting into your house.
Yeah.
You have to put 13 items. They give the example of like pennies or rocks all in a line across the threshold of your doors and windows. And the reason for that is because apparently a Rougarou can only count to 12.
Okay.
Okay.
How this was ever discovered, I will never know. But apparently, because he can only count to 12, that 13th object stumps him and he can't figure out how to get in.
First time I've ever heard of math eliminating a cryptid.
Right?
Yeah.
I think it's brilliant.
Yeah.
I really do.
I like it.
Science prevails again.
At any rate, that is my first cryptid that I was talking about. I really loved this one. So I hope, I know Anthony has a really good one for the next one.
Yeah. I'm going to say my scariest one for last because it's really chilling.
Yeah.
But I want to start one that's a little more well known, but still pretty obscure because it's pretty recent in our history. You may have heard of it. It's called the Fresno Nightcrawler. The Fresno Nightcrawler actually began in 2010. It's a really odd one. It's not like, I wouldn't say it's scary. It's more just weird. I couldn't
The
even
footage
begin.
is hella creepy.
It's creepy for sure.
We're
It's
gonna
just
show
weird.
you, but
Because no one knows what it is. And we have video of it we'll show. But a man named Jose in Fresno, California, heard a noise one night. And he checked his security footage camera and saw this weird, odd-shaped being, is all I can say. It's all white, stark white. If you had to describe it, it almost looks like stilts with a giant white parachute around it.
yeah, like almost like a sheet or, but it's formed into legs.
And if you really look at it closely, the bigger ones, because most of them are really small, but the bigger ones almost have like tendon-like things from their knee to the top of the body. And the thing is, they have no real visible upper body. It looks like it's pretty much just legs
And a head. Right.
walking around. And this guy on his footage caught these, at least one, and then another one followed by
Yeah, I think there's two.
following the other one, walking across his lawn. and he got his brother up, and they saw and played the footage again. They saw it. They called the authorities. They claimed that there were footprints there, but by the time the authorities got there, the footprints had disappeared. Actually, the sci-fi show, Fact or Faked,
Right.
actually went out to the property where this first happened, like 2014, I believe.
Right.
And the show is all about trying to see if they could recreate what happened using any modern means to see if this was faked or not.
Right.
And all the experiments they ran that they can think of, they could not recreate this from any man-made objects.
Because, it looked, you guys will see the footage, but it literally looked like almost sheets billowing, like for the legs, but they were jointed.
Yeah.
Because they were walking and strutting across this property, and like you said, no body but a head sitting on top.
It's totally bizarre.
It's really bizarre.
And it moved too fluid for me to think that there was a person somehow hiding inside, or that there was video editing. And the grainy footage, it's on a security camera, so I can't imagine how. And that it was 2010. It wasn't our modern day,
right? With
the editing that we have,
and whatnot,
and then there is another sighting actually. I think a couple years later in Yosemite.
Yeah, I was going to say
Yosemite National Forest. There's a sighting. It was very brief, but through the trees, there's a camera that is on a trail, and you can see two of them again walking. A smaller one that we can almost call it the baby, and then the bigger one where you can call it the mom, kind of walking in tandem together, side by side. And again, the movement is just so fluid. It's so strange. I've never seen the footage, but there's supposedly a man in 2019 who caught the last footage. And it was in a Eastern European country.
See, I didn't know about that one.
Yeah, I didn't either. But the thing is, no one can verify it because it was on a handheld camera and it was very shaky. Okay. So it wasn't like a regular security camera footage.
Right.
But supposedly that's the only place outside of California where these Fresno night crawlers have been seen.
Really?
The weird thing is no one knows what it is. Some people who want to be skeptics will say it's a deer that can walk upright.
Oh, no.
Or it's a puppet on string. But again, these were all tested by the people at Fact or Faked, and they could not recreate that movement.
Nothing they did looked remotely similar on camera, not even close.
Believers in this creature actually lean more towards extraterrestrial.
I was going to say cryptid or alien.
Yeah.
The question here.
So that's the thing, because I mean, they definitely looked alive in a sense. But whether they come from our world or not, I couldn't tell you, because I've never seen. There were some people who wanted to try and claim that there's Native American ties to this creature.
Yeah, to some sort of god.
Yeah,
they worship.
But Native Americans tribes came forward and said, no, this is not related to any of our mythology, our beliefs whatsoever.
Right.
So that was disproven. So there's really no history to sightings of this creature. At all. This is a recent phenomenon. So in my mind, I'm like, is this like an interdimensional cryptid?
Right.
I mean, we've talked about Bigfoot. Some people have that belief that Bigfoot is interdimensional, and that's why no one's ever caught him. Yeah. Supposedly, because he zaps out before you can catch up to him. Yeah. So if that's any truth to that, are these Fresno night crawlers just passing through our world to somewhere else?
All this stuff, that we talk about when it comes to cryptids or even alien sightings, a lot of them. A lot of stuff happens around woods. You have Yosemite, and then even the one in Fresno, it was a wooded area that they kind of came through, or big fields, or what have you. And the moral of my story is don't go in the woods. You don't want to come up against this stuff.
Yeah.
Especially with all the missing 411 cases, too. I mean, there's just, don't go in the woods, man. There's something weird going on.
Yeah. I think the thing for me about this footage is the way they move.
Yeah.
It gives, again, that whole creepy vibe,
Yeah, I definitely watched the video because even though it's grainy, it's very strange the way they move in together. Oof.
Oh, yeah.
It's a good one. I like that one.
Yeah, that one's interesting.
Yeah.
All right, I guess it's up to you now, Allie.
Yeah, I'll try and top that as best I can. No, but mine is interesting because it has to do with something dragon-like.
Ooh, I like dragons.
And the thing about it is, it's usually when you hear about dragon lore, it's in European countries or Asian culture.
Right.
It's not often that you hear about it in America.
Ooh, nice.
And This cryptid supposedly resides in Maryland.
Okay.
Which is
Okay.
Not far.
from us.
Not far.
So I'm going to pull up the details of this one because it's very interesting.
Okay, I can't wait.
So this started in the 1730s, and it was when some German immigrants had settled in Frederick County, Maryland. So there were strange early accounts and reports of a half reptile, half bird creature, obviously winged,
Okay.
who would also sometimes be described as having tentacles.
Oh.
So kind of
Okay.
interesting there.
Yeah.
He would swoop down from the sky and carry off townsfolk, draining their bodies of blood.
Well, that's a little disconcerting.
Yeah.
So this was something that spread around the town, that people were terrified of this creature, right? So he was also said to have a metallic beak lined with razor-sharp teeth. And he was said to be living deep in the South Mountains caves. So he would come out and just swoop down, get the townsfolk, bring them back, and drain them of their blood.
Okay.
Wow.
So, yeah, a little
A
disconcerting.
little
for sure.
bit. Yeah.
For sure. So the sightings actually went quiet until 1909, though.
Okay.
So for 200 years, no one really talked about it. But then there was a report in the paper about townsfolk, again,
Seen this?
Yeah,
being taken and
being taken and plagued by their fear of this creature or monster, whatever you would like to call it.
yeah.
It was later revealed, supposedly, that it was a hoax.
Okay.
That it was written about. But people weren't so sure because why did it come up again after 200 years?
Yeah.
You know, there was actually even a reward for the beast's hide.
Wow.
Yeah. So the other interesting thing is, guess who wanted to hunt the Snallygaster?
I don't know.
Teddy Roosevelt.
Also,
Okay.
Teddy
There's
Roosevelt.
actual proof of this in the papers from
Right.
back then and all that.
And so then they called this thing a
the Snallygaster. Yeah.
Snallygaster.
Which
That's a
I
hell of a
think is
name.
fun name.
That is a fun name.
You know, so
But I mean, we were talking before because presidents and people like in high society
yeah.
during this time frame, the paranormal wasn't one of those taboo things. It was
No.
actually very popular.
Yeah.
And you had the whole spiritualist movement.
Exactly.
And I believe it was either Roosevelt or Eisenhower that also was involved in the Curse of Oak Island
Oh, yeah.
heavily.
Yeah.
So, you know, presidents weren't like, oh, well, I can't show that I'm into this
Be
stuff.
associated with it. Or,
Not at all. Yeah.
Exactly. I mean,
So that's pretty cool.
it was definitely more accepted back then.
Yeah.
But the other interesting thing about the Snallygaster, it has a widely known enemy
Uh-oh.
called the Dueo. Now, if this doesn't remind you of like Godzilla and like
Okay,
all these
Mothra.
enemies, right?
That's
Yeah.
awesome.
This is what it reminded me of. So, the Dueo is reported to be a mammalian biped with features similar to a wolf, but the stance and stature of a human.
Okay.
And the Dueo and the Snallygaster have reportedly had vicious encounters dating back to the early settlement of the Middletown Valley.
Okay.
Okay, that's awesome.
So
I would love to
love
see
that-
a man-like creature fighting a dragon.
Yes, I know. I love that this cryptid actually has its own enemy.
I love that.
That's what I love the most about the Snallygaster.
It's like watching the
lore.
T-Rex fight the Velociraptor.
Yeah.
Exactly. And then you're like, I kind of want to watch the showdown. You know?
I want to see a movie.
Yeah.
Exactly. There
Okay.
needs to be.
Can we please get that into production somehow?
And I love that the Snallygaster is so close to where we are too. I think
Right.
that's interesting. That
Have there been any, like, what's the most recent sighting, did they say?
they didn't say the most recent sighting, but there are still people who like
Believe
talk
in
about
it.
it and believe in it today.
And anything to do with caves. You know?
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
There's always stuff, like, again, with the woods, it's always woods, caves,
Oh yeah.
tunnels.
Always.
Great place for cryptids and whatnot to hide, right?
Oh yeah.
That's awesome. I love that one. And the movie title, The Snallygaster versus the
Dueo.
The Dueo.
Yeah.
Come
It
on.
writes itself.
Absolutely.
All I'm imagining is this thing hibernating for 200 years.
Oh my God,
Right.
And
yes.
it's like a cycle almost. Like, does it come out every couple hundred years?
Yeah, almost
Yeah.
like Jeepers Creepers. right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then the Dueo is waiting to protect or fight. the
And being a
same
Dueo is
Yeah.
handed down
generation.
Yeah.
and through families.
Yes.
And maybe
telling
like
you.
current day guy doesn't even know he's a
To
Dueo.
look up his
Until it comes back.
Oh my
is there a
God.
family in that town that's been there ever since the
Yes.
beginning? I mean,
Okay, Ray, can you have your people get on this so we can get a movie deal?
We need a movie.
Because I want like copyright protection and everything for the story.
Morissette Media will do anything.
Okay, yes, I love
right.
it. It's going to be a Morissette Media exclusive,
Yes.
right?
Certainly. I'm also from Annapolis, Maryland, if you didn't
Oh,
know.
really?
Right.
Wow.
I'm around Frederick area.
Oh
Wow.
my gosh.
Cool.
Yeah, but I've never heard of the Snallygaster.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
That's very
Wow.
Like
awesome.
a new one for us too. that
Yeah.
We found out about.
I
it.
love
That was pretty
new
cool.
finding out new things.
Right.
Like never heard of SCPs before today. So
Yeah,
Wow.
that's true.
that's
really
really cool. All right, I guess it's my turn again.
Yeah.
Because I have another one.
Oh, here we go.
So this one actually is in Ohio.
Okay.
And this is the Loveland Frogman. Okay, yeah, I know. Like, I've never heard of this one either, but apparently it's pretty popular in that area. And this one, I think the first sighting of the Frogman was in 1955.
Okay.
And this story kind of was like, if you see something like this, you're going to be creeped out. I'm guaranteeing you. But this was a man who saw 3 creatures that were kind of like, it was in this area where there was a lake nearby called like Little Miami Lake in Ohio.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know. But he saw these 3 creatures almost off to the side of the road. And that looked like they were having a conversation, but they weren't humans.
Yeah.
They looked like very, very big frogs.
Okay.
Okay, they had like a frog or lizard type head, no hair, just sort of like a wrinkled type brow and huge eyes. They were about 4 foot tall. They were standing on 2 legs, just standing straight up like a human,
Okay.
and seemed like they were talking to one another. And he kind of was just like shocked, and standing there staring at them for a bit, like, what the hell am I seeing?
Yeah.
And then he saw one of them holding what he could only describe as some sort of wand
Okay.
and then raise it over his head like he was going to do something with this wand.
Okay.
That was enough for him, and he was out of there.
I kind of
Wow.
want to see what he was doing with the wand.
Right? Why not stay and see what he's going to do with the
For a second
wand?
Wow.
you
Like,
know?
is he going to make the other 2 disappear?
Yes. Is he gonna turn back into like a human?
Oh my God, he's the prince that got
Yes.
kissed and turned
Yes.
into a frog.
Okay.
Wow.
Something was happening with the wand, and I personally am really upset that I don't know what that was.
Wow.
But I digress.
That's
so
really interesting to me.
It's an interesting one, and obviously when we hear wand,
Yeah.
we think about the story of Edidorfa. That this is obviously deep dive material.
Yeah.
But
I mean, any modern day, stories of goblins and caves.
right.
A lot of people will talk about these little creatures that are in hoods with wands.
Right, that are like the gatekeepers.
They're gatekeepers, and they zap you and they paralyze you until they can escape back into their cave or
Right.
their tunnels or whatever. I mean, they use even in the Mojave Desert
Yes.
a story of a Native American tribe and the leader of this tribe encountering a being with a rod or a wand
Right.
that would zap people.
Exactly. This goes
kill
way
them.
back.
Yeah. So wands. That's
Yeah, when I heard that, I was like, this is really intriguing.
Yeah.
Like, what was he going to do with the wand?
Oh,
But anyway, so the next sightings don't happen until like 1972.
okay.
And in 1972, 2 different police officers come across this same type of creature, described almost exactly the same way as the one in the 1950s. And one of them describes that he was on the long side of the highway, and he saw this thing and was kind of like shining his light to see what it was, and then saw it stand up on its 2 hind legs like a person, and it was again about 3 to 4 feet tall and had like a frog head, but almost like a humanoid body.
Okay.
And then step over the guardrail like it was gonna just cross the road. And that was his account. And the other officer actually claimed to have shot this thing.
Okay.
But then later in years, when the next sighting happens, he recants his story. But I mean, there's no real proof of he didn't bring forth some other type of thing that he shot and say, no, it was this. He claims now, years later, that, it was just a lizard with no tail.
Okay.
Okay. That's
Right.
yeah. So The next sighting happens in like 2016, I believe it was, when the Pokemon Go
Right.
craze
Yeah,
was
yeah.
really big. And there was a couple who was out there in that area who was playing Pokemon Go. And they see off in the distance this same kind of creature described almost exactly the same way. You know, it was about 4 feet tall, had huge, big, glowing eyes. I believe we have a picture that we can insert.
Oh, perfect.
And it stood up, it was bipedal, and it had like a humanoid type of body and the whole 9 yards. And
Yeah.
there's never been anything that has, you know, come out to discount they were adamant that this is a hand of God, this is what we saw.
Yeah.
And all in the same area. So
Wow.
Interesting.
yeah, other than that, like, you know, there isn't a lot of backstory to like the origin of it except for these sightings. So as far as where it's like, it's different from the Rougarou where it had this whole history to it.
Yeah.
But these are more in more recent times that
Yeah.
these, you know, this thing has been seen.
Right.
So what is the Loveland, Ohio Frogman? We don't exactly know.
Yeah.
But if you are from the area, or if anyone has any stories, they think
Yeah.
they've seen it, please leave it in the comments.
Yeah.
We want to know.
That's
'Cause
really interesting.
This one was really interesting to me,
Oh, yeah.
especially with the wand scenario.
Yeah, that's
So,
really cool.
you know, and back, and we've talked about this, like when we talked about Woodrow Derenberger meeting Indra Cole, that back in that time period, it wasn't popular to come out and say you saw bizarre stuff.
No, I mean,
We had left that whole spiritualist era, and it got to be where, you know, if you saw stuff like this, talked about it, you were crazy.
yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But, you know, that being the first sighting, I felt like it held a little more weight to me.
Wow.
Yeah, I agree.
So those are mine. So, yeah,
right.
another
That's
one
an
more.
interesting one.
Yeah, I guess I'll end it because this one is really chilling. You know, I looked for some interesting ones, and you know, I came across a praying mantis, a giant praying mantis man,
Oh,
and I
cool.
was like originally going to try and do something about that, but then I thought it back, and I had heard of one a long time ago from the Philippines, and it's actually part of their culture for a long, long time. And I thought we got to do this one, so I hope I'm not going to mispronounce it. It's called the Aswang.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, if you ever don't know what the Aswang is, the Aswang is actually an umbrella term for about 5 different types of creatures that exist in the country, but they're all bloodsuckers. They're all evil for all intents
Yeah.
and purposes.
Right.
So I have my notes here. So the Aswang, originally part of Filipino culture. It's a term for vampires,
Okay.
ghouls, witches, viscera suckers, and human beast hybrids, which usually the beasts are either a dog, a cat, or even some have been a pig.
Interesting.
So some of the oldest writings about the Aswang actually date back to the 1500s when Spanish friars would be going on missionary work.
Right.
And they went to the Philippines to go and start trying to convert people to Christianity. Well, there's a friar there, and I want to get his name right, Juan de Plasencia, in 1589. And he spoke of legends of creatures who ate their own livers and other people's livers.
Okay.
He also spoke of a creature that people said was a man, but he thinks was a devil who walked around at night with no head, but he carried the head with him. And he didn't really attack people. He just carried the head around to scare people.
That's a good visual.
Yeah.
Right.
it is,
And then
right?
morning would come, and he'd go lay down, put his head back on, and then he'd wake up as a normal
As
person.
one does.
I like the thought of just like someone strolling around like
with
this
their head.
Yeah.
And then they
Yeah.
get home and they just slap
They're
it
like,
back
"All right,
on.
I'm gonna go to bed
Does he
now."
have like
Yeah.
little
Yeah.
fasteners?
Hey, Jack, what's going on? Nothing.
Yeah.
You know?
Exactly.
I mean,
Yeah.
Oh,
so
that I could take off my head, right?
Yeah, exactly.
he was convinced that this was the devil's work. That, you know, even though he thinks that this was nothing more than a fable, the locals believed it so much that he thinks it was the devil working through the people. But
see
this
how
was
you would get to that
inherently
conclusion.
part of Filipino mythology, Filipino culture. I mean, to this day,
Right.
people believe in this creature, and I'll get more into that in a minute.
yeah.
But the 5 different creatures, of course, there's the vampire, but the vampire isn't like the typical Western vampires that you know, where the fangs come out, intimate blood sucking. These vampires have really long, sharp tongues, that they shoot out at their victims to drain them of blood.
Okay.
And with a lot of these Aswang creatures, they're all very similar. This one, a lot of them pretend to be human during the daytime. And that's how they infiltrate society in Filipino culture. They look past us humans, as vampires are typically beautiful women who will find a man to marry into his family. And then she will either slowly feed on him, or if she wants to preserve her identity, she'll go to local villages nearby to start feeding on the local populace at night.
Okay, so I've got to say. Okay, so like if you see a couple and you have this average looking dude and you see this really beautiful woman right away, are you just like, oh shit, that's Aswang?
Yeah, I know.
I mean, like you wonder, like how would they even possibly know?
Kind of like the Salem witch trials. When
Yeah.
Witch.
Yeah,
Or anything.
exactly.
Like anything.
That must be very treacherous.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I haven't been able to find the video again, but there's one of those, on YouTube, they have those channels that compile like scary clips and stuff.
Yeah.
And the reason I know of the Aswang is there was a story a few years ago of an Aswang sighting of this really weird, I don't know if it was a woman or a man, but there's security footage outside of this apartment complex. And I don't know if you remember this, but it was outside the bars. It was metal bars. There was no way they could open the lock. And all of a sudden, they just slip through the bars.
Oh, I remember it.
Almost fluidly and appear. And people saw this video and were convinced that this was an Aswang.
Right.
And then the Aswang was among them, living in the apartment complex somehow.
Yep.
So,
It's very creepy. We'll have to find it.
I'm going to try and find this.
Yeah.
It was really creepy to watch. But that was one example. Then there's the were-dog. Dogs weren't exactly native to the areas that the Aswang was reported, so to see a dog, especially a giant dog like that, was weird. But they would also shift into cats or pigs. They feasted on primarily pregnant women who traveled at night alone.
Okay.
So if a pregnant woman was traveling alone at night, they were susceptible to being fed on by the Aswang.
That's rude.
Yeah. That's kind of a bit much.
Unlike the vampire, they actually pass themselves off during the day as either a peddler or as a construction worker.
So, like, you could trust nobody in the
No one.
Philippines, basically.
Pretty much
nobody.
Aswang in Filipino culture is supposed to be the antithesis of all they believe is good and moral and right.
Right.
So this was their evil creature that they, blamed a lot of stuff on. And the people really believe this to this day. I'm going to get to the really weird one that was actually cited recently.
Okay.
The viscera sucker, okay? Hides as a beautiful woman during the day, but at night, she detaches her upper body from her lower body. She has to hide the lower body to protect herself so that if someone discovers it, they can't destroy her that way. Then she grows 10-foot wings and flies off into the night to go and find people to feed on.
Okay.
I mentioned this one not only because it's very disturbing image, and I'll show some images. I found some images online that were really creepy artist rendering. But a few years ago, I think it was 2018, there was an actual city in the Philippines that police had to assuage people's fears of an Aswang sighting because two girls walking home at night claimed that they saw this viscera sucker on the roof of a house.
Okay.
And that when it saw them approaching, it took off, screeching into the night.
Okay.
And the girls, of course, were terrified. They went home, they told people, and all the rumor mill spread that the viscera sucker, the Aswang, was in their city. And so police had to go and assuage people's fears and go look to make sure this creature wasn't around.
Oh my gosh.
Or was it?
Or was it?
Yeah.
See, I like this one because it heard the stories of the guy who walked around holding his head, and they say, I can do you one better.
Yeah.
I'm taking off my whole upper body.
Yeah.
And flying around for a while.
Yeah.
Okay, before you said the wings, I was just imagining like her dragging herself around.
Yeah.
Okay, that would be kind of cool though, right?
But then the wings.
Even
Yeah.
creepier.
Yeah.
Well, they again, the viscera sucker also feeds on pregnant women, but specifically the fetus
Oh,
of a pregnant woman, which is really creepy.
Yeah.
They also use marriage to infiltrate society.
see, you can't trust anybody
Yeah.
out
Don't
there.
get married.
They're going married.
Don't get married. Don't become a peddler.
No.
Okay.
Don't become a construction
Yeah.
worker. And you're set in the Philippines.
Now,
Good.
this one has generally feared, and they don't interact with it at all during the daytime because they know not to mess with it, and that's the witch.
Okay.
In Filipino culture, the witch is to be feared at all times because at a moment's notice, she could curse you to the point where she could cause rice, bones, or insects to come pouring out of you.
Nope.
What?
I'm done.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So in a lot of villages, if a person is known as a witch, she lives alone off in her own place, and everyone avoids that at all costs. They're not to interact with her.
How do they know who's a witch? That's the question.
I have no idea.
They just look at someone and they'll be like, oh, witch.
Well, apparently, if a witch shares enough traits with what people know as an Aswang, she can become an Aswang and gain even more power to her witch powers
Okay.
Okay.
by becoming an Aswang in their culture. So,
Solid.
yeah. Now, the most foul, I guess you can say, one is the ghoul.
The ghoul. Well,
The ghoul is the most feral of all because they hide in trees near cemeteries.
okay. We've seen video footage of
Yes,
this.
and about these, they don't attack living people. They eat bodies.
Okay.
They wait, especially for freshly dug graves.
Yeah, I would
but
imagine.
anybody will do. They will go and they have sharp fangs and sharp claws to help digest
Dig
and
'em.
get the bodies even more,
Okay.
and they eat them all.
Okay.
And they are very foul smelling as well. So you can always tell when an Aswang is nearby because it smells like decaying
Or they're
flesh.
eating dead bodies.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think
You
that
would imagine.
adds
Yeah.
to the smell, I'm sure.
It sells itself.
All of these Aswang are supposedly very strong at night, almost impossible to fight. But during the daytime, they're depowered. That's why they can pass as human, because they're vulnerable during the daytime. So during wakes in Filipino culture, a lot of people will actually keep bright lights around the grave to keep these ghouls or other Aswang away from the people there, because the bright light will deter them.
Wow.
So they're considered evil and an inversion of all the morals of the Philippines.
Wow.
So, okay, that's a lot to digest.
Yeah.
No pun intended.
Yeah.
Oh, God.
And I just want to say that this is not a video for tourism for the Philippines.
No.
Probably not.
Yeah, I think that what's really going to be cool, though, is we've seen like more than one videos of what should be the ghoul version of the
Yeah.
Aswang.
It's actually gotten very popular on TikTok,
Yeah.
as a matter of fact. And we'll share a video clip here. But there are several clips of people who, especially this one and this family with little children, were all huddled in a barn because they heard a screeching Aswang outside. And two of the men in the family went outside with sticks to go and investigate.
Yeah.
And you see this really creepy, bloody woman, Aswang, holding what looks like a baby in her arms.
That's
And
a problem.
I mean, this is one example, but this has gotten very popular on TikTok. Whether all of these are real or not, of course,
Right.
leave that up to you to decide. But I mean, it's very popular and ingrained in the belief system in the Philippines.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
Wow.
really.
Well, you know, we've talked about doing our own like cemetery investigations that we're going to have on the Patreon. Have we checked to see if we have anything like an Aswang that hangs around
I know.
cemeteries out here in Virginia?
Yeah, just because it's part of
Just so
the
we
Philippines
know.
doesn't mean they travel. I mean, you talked about the Rougarou, how
Yeah.
the white dog thing is
Yeah.
very similar to the Henrico thing.
Exactly.
Do these creatures have to stay in the country of origin, or can they travel?
Or if they interdimensional, I guess they can go wherever they want, right?
Yeah.
It's
If,
true.
if that's the case.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. That was chilling. Mm-hmm. That will give me some nightmares. Today.
Yeah.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Of course.
So I think that's all that we have with our unknown, sort of known cryptids today.
yeah.
Anthony, did you want to tell everybody again about how to sign up for the Patreon?
Yeah. We, of course, our Patreon is now live. So if you want to become a patron, support the show, We'd really appreciate it. And you can get access to exclusive episodes, monthly live streams. We'll do live experiments, access to investigations that we do, evidence that we collect, all that fun stuff. And we'll also have a discount for our shop.
Yeah.
Because we actually have a shop with merch. And we're very proud of it. And I think you guys will like some of the cool stuff there. And you're going to get a 15% discount on that store if you join Patreon. So
I think we need to make a shirt for the Snallygaster versus the Duano movie
Yes.
that
Yeah.
we're going to develop.
if you guys, if there are any artists watching here who would like to help create something like that, that would be cool because that's a movie waiting to happen.
Absolutely is. I'm
So-
telling you.
Oh yeah.
But thank you guys again for liking, follow, subscribe, all that good stuff, and for digging this weird stuff as much as we do.
Yeah, what's some of your favorite cryptids that you've ever heard
Yeah.
of? Maybe
Yeah.
and let us know because there are some we never heard of obviously today
Absolutely.
that were really cool. So if
There's
there's
so many out there.
yeah, and some that aren't even reported all the time. Some that are just very local to communities. So
Yeah.
if you guys have one or are watching this and have one you want to let us know, leave it in the comments or email us, and we'll be happy to maybe do a bonus episode on that.
Yeah.
So
Yep, absolutely. Well, that's all for us today, and we will be back.
we're really looking forward to this episode. So
Yeah.
make sure you guys subscribe, like we said, and tune in for that.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
So you want to take us out?
Yeah. Thank you guys for watching as always. And remember, don't fear the unknown.